Hello, everyone, and good whatever moment of this wonderful day you are enjoying on your time zones. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is such a joy to start day two of the February series, and I have been looking forward to this panel on the power of stories and communication for weeks and weeks and weeks. My name is Minola Jacques. I will be your co host for the next hour. Jessa is backstage. And as a journalist by trade and a change manager by choice, I cannot think of any other topic to brighten up my day here in a little bit gloomy at the moment, Switzerland. I see we have comments already popping in from the audience. Welcome, everybody. It's wonderful to have you here. And please do let us know where you're connecting from. We travel vicariously through your comments, and just reading your locations make this wonderful world even better and brighter. We have an amazing lineup of speakers, so Jessa, please do help me making the screen full of inspiration and happiness. So many wonderful people. And we are here for an amazing topic. We are here to talk about storytelling. I deeply believe that storytelling is a life sense making literacy. And I will be so happy to hear all your insights and all your ideas and all your stories across the next hour or so. We are waiting for one more panelist, and we will go agile, not fragile, and we will welcome her whenever she can join. And let's make the most out of our time today. I will pass the e-mic around as you appear on my screen, clockwise, and I will ask you to first shortly introduce yourselves and also let us know what is the meaning that you personally attach to storytelling that you bring into our conversation today. Lisa, good to see you. Welcome.
Sorry, I'm on mute still. Good morning. Hi. It's early here in California, a little, sort of. Um, Good morning, everyone. Lisa Sanders, joining you, as I said, from Northern California. Super excited to be here. This is one of my passion topics that I talk about a lot. So I'm super excited to join you all to hear from the audience and from my co-panelists on the importance of storytelling. It's something that I've been doing for a really long time in my role. I think for me, leadership, storytelling and leadership is not just about sharing experiences, right? It's a tool to inspire and connect. And I'm going to focus on the word connect, right? For me, storytelling throughout my career, especially in talent acquisition and in my coaching, I'm an executive coach, is about connection, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that's what everyone wants, is a connection, right? On multiple levels, right? In different parts of our life. So I feel like it's where we bring our vision and our values to life, right? It's where we make them meaningful, relatable, right? That, we share a little piece of ourselves by being vulnerable and sharing our stories.
Hmm. Wonderful. Thank you. Nicole, welcome on my screen.
Hello, hello. Thanks for having me here today. Like Lisa, I am also passionate about this topic. I think it's so key to success in the real world and the working world. And so thank you for having me. I'm Nicole Riley. I'm a chief people officer and also the owner of Elevate Executive Consulting. Storytelling for me, I think from an HR perspective, has so much to do with our influence in our role and within our function and what we do. I agree wholeheartedly with Lisa that it allows you to make a connection, but it's also something that as a coach, as you develop leaders, is also something that can really move the business forward, right? Being able to find that purpose, whether it's trying to make a sale, trying to close a deal, whatever it is, the way you tell the story around what you're trying to achieve is key. Manola is a change manager by choice. You cannot go through the change management process without telling the story of the why, when, how, and what we hope to achieve at the end. And so for me, it is the package, right, of what you're trying to achieve. And if you don't have that package with the bow of the storytelling, you can lose sight of what you're trying to achieve and how you're trying to get there. And so to me, it is absolutely key to what you're trying to do, and it will bring people along with a level of understanding that you may not have otherwise.
So wonderful. Thank you so much, Nicole. Jason, a joy.
Hey, I always seem to end up on the bottom right corner. I don't know why, but that's just seems to be my spot. So, Jason Rosoli, very nice to meet everyone, and welcome panelists. Great to have you here today and be with you. Jason, I've been with in HR for over 25 years, doing human resources, labor relations, Fortune 500s, small businesses. I've helped startups. But storytelling is all about, showing empathy, the connection, of course, inspiring, problem solving, working with employees not on an individual basis and also on a global or a cultural basis to help drive them forward, to make that connection with what's in it for them. But it's also to show transparency and the human element of a leader, right? So that way, again, they can make that connection. So on a personal level, I learned the golden rule, and I've lived that since I was taught that by my upbringing of treating others as you want to be treated. And through that, I think there's that storytelling that comes along with how do you make those connections with people? How do you show them that you're the human side of you as a leader, that you've either been in their shoes or you're with them somehow in their journey to make that connection. So great topic. Obviously, we're all passionate about it, and I can't wait to discuss it more.
Thank you so much, Jason. And last but not least, Pamlin. It's so good to see you and have you in this conversation.
Hi again. Great to be here. Thank you for having me. The second I saw this topic, I jumped on the sign-on sheet because, like everybody else here, I am super passionate about storytelling, and I will be very candid and say I might sound a little bit more mercenary. Because when I think about storytelling, it is absolutely, yes, about connection and purpose and forward velocity. But for me, it's ultimately a toolkit, a part of our toolkit for influencing. We talk about being data-driven and the criticality of leading with data in terms of informing and influencing decisioning at the executive level, really at every level. But for me, storytelling is about bringing the data itself to life. I can come at you with all the charts and all the jargon and all the tools and say, okay, we need to do this, and here's the statistic. But until I can really craft an effective story that gets people engaged and excited, it's harder to get buy-in. So for me, storytelling is a way to really, again, bring the data to life, to be able to bring context to the data and to provide the insights in a meaningful way that evokes an emotional response, which is how we get the buy-in, which is how we get that action orientation. So I'm excited to sort of bring that data piece of it into the conversation today.
And wonderful timing, Bridget. Welcome. I hope everything is okay with audio, with video, and let's test it right away. Just a short introduction, and then what makes storytelling so personally meaningful to you, and what's the understanding of storytelling that you bring into the conversation today?
Thank you, and hopefully you can hear me okay.
Wonderful.
Fantastic. So my name is Bridget White. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia in the US, and I lead HR for the Adecco Group, partnering closely to lead the Adecco brand, but also serving as country head of HR for the US. And for me, storytelling is so impactful and powerful because it allows leaders and employees at all levels to understand what someone else brings to the conversation. They understand it resonates. It also shows the power of authentic leadership. I think we're in a space in the world, and just really as we've evolved as leaders in time, to where you can show up as your best self. And in being your best self, it empowers others to do the same. And storytelling brings that connection through shared experiences, relatability, but also giving the opportunity to just be. And that's important.
We've had several opportunities to share panels together before, and I know that everybody in the audience is in for a special treat because you are also amazing storytellers. So this will definitely be a great hour. I can feel that we are recording a blockbuster right now. I do want to encourage everybody in the audience to consider the comments and the chat their own space of conversation. So as we will raise questions for the panelists, please drop your own stories, drop your own ideas, drop your own take on whatever slice of the topic we are addressing. And also, I know that we always keep an eye on your comments. If there are particular questions that get inspired from our conversation, drop them there, and we will try to pick as many of them up and bring them into our panel as soon as possible. Now, before we dive very, very deep into maybe the technicalities and the logistics of storytelling, I would really invite all of you, let's take a few minutes and look at how does storytelling show up as an HR superpower when influencing across the organization. And how should we do it? Nicole, would you like to lead us into this? And then you all know the drill. The unmuting competition will be officially open and you just tell your own story.
I love when you're our moderator. Yeah. I truly believe that storytelling is a superpower, regardless of where you sit in an organization. But I think particularly for HR, when it comes to influencing, because I think when you are able to connect the dots of what is going on, whether you're bringing in the analytics and the data, whether you're helping somebody understand the impact of whatever part of the organization that they're in, when you're able to take, and tell the sort of forest from the trees story about what needs to happen, change, influence a decision for the organization, get people to think differently, that is a superpower, right? I mean, let's be clear. There's very few decisions in HR, or really in any role, that you make individually, right? These are all collaborative decisions that we make. And so it takes influence, whether it's influencing finance to give you the resources, influencing CEO to get up and deliver a message maybe they don't want to. Whatever it is, it takes influence. And so being able to connect the dots and really craft that story, right? I work a lot with my teams on storytelling. We do storytelling development. We bring in various resources around. I've brought, I'm sorry, I just lost the word. I have brought in sort of media training for folks to understand how to craft a story. Even though they're not going to be in front of the media, it helps them learn how to craft the story. And it is, I think superpower is the right thing, because your message, as I said before, can fall flat if you're not able to pull in all the critical elements and take a thread and weave it all the way through to a nice bow at the end. And I think if you can bring in something personal, to that individual, get them to understand something that is a bigger impact to the organization than maybe the one decision, it's those threads that you pull across, and it gets people to that aha moment, which allows you to then influence in a different way, right? Data's great, but as Pamela said, you have to tell the story around it, right? It's just numbers until you can place the story behind it. And so it really is, to me, it is influencing in our role is the most critical skill. And you can't do it without the ability of storytelling.
Nicole, that's an excellent point, and I'll echo that to share. I had I'll do a little bit of storytelling myself. Just this past week, I was in a meeting with leaders, and I started to indicate why we might want to consider taking a particular path or why not to take a particular path. And another member of the team said, actually, that's a business decision. So me being me, my neck kind of snapped. I'm like, whoa. And it took moments to say, you know what, for me, let me pause then and reintroduce the conversation through the lens of storytelling. What are you looking to solve? Let me understand what is the root cause, because this potential decision feels a bit reactionary, but let me understand, seek first to understand. And then from there, I didn't respond in the moment. So the ability to step back and have a follow-up conversation, taking the data and understanding this is what you're looking to solve. Let's pull that thread all the way through. If you were to make this decision with what you're trying to solve, this could be the impact. This is the data that suggests that this might not be the right course of action because we are already operating in a different way. Let us think about these other opportunities. What would be the cultural impact? Should we make this decision? What is the reaction that we're having today? What is our engagement today in this space based on our pulse results or engagement survey results? How might that be impacted by this course of action? And really, what is it that we want to accomplish in the end? So the storytelling, my initial response was, well, this is not that's my role of influence. I need to influence differently, make sure the right stakeholders are part of the conversation to influence differently, but also use storytelling to pull that thread all the way through. Because Nicole, to your point, it's easy to make decisions in a bubble and potentially be a bit more reactive, but the proactive partnership through storytelling allows for a much better outcome.
Love it. I usually call that detachment, right? So you're detaching yourself from the situation, looking at it from an outside observation, then reintroducing yourself, just like you mentioned. So perfectly said. And Nicole, to your standpoint, the influence, I always look at an HR person like, we can't do it all, but we can set the framework for all of it to be done. So like, we're like master game, playmakers here, because, the organization's, driven by the culture and the people within the organization. And that's really like our play, like that's our framework that we operate in. And so being able to sculpt that masterpiece within the organization and mold it to how we think it might be best served is something that's where our expertise is. And in order to, again, to Nicole's point, in order to get that through, to convey that message, to inspire leadership to follow that framework, that play that we're looking to execute, it takes influence, it takes storytelling, and that's what we're all about here today.
100% agree. I think that when we think about, to your point, Jason, sort of how to get that buy-in, and I think for me, data storytelling makes it a much more digestible way. And that's a cool way to say it's building relationships, right? It is creating a narrative that gets people emotionally engaged and excited about what we're trying to accomplish. And I love the examples that I'm hearing around the whole, let's say table, but the whole screen that really speak to sort of, there's not one right way to do it. I think there's some standards around, every story has an arc, right? And when every story's got a narrative, we've got to build in. But I do think that it's one of the most important things in our toolkits, to Nicole's point, without being able to influence, without being able to tell a compelling story, it's a lot harder for us to move the needle and to get the work done that we need to get done and focus on what's really important.
Lisa.
Yes. So, everything that everyone said is absolutely part of what I think is so important about storytelling. But, one of the things for me is that it's about creating a narrative around the company's values, what we stand for. To your point, Pamela, what are our goals? What's the outcome that we're looking for from the company, right? And we can't really convey that well, in my opinion, without a story. They're not tales, right? They're not things we spin up and, they have to be real, right? And the more we share our stories of why a core value is part of the company, like this is our core value, the more employees will build their stories based on your story, right? Your experience as potentially an early employee, that they go, oh, okay, I get what, resilience means or whatever, right? It's not just a word you picked out of the dictionary, right? Tell me why is that a core value, right? It's not something you check at the door, right? It's something that they bring with them and it becomes part of their experience with the company, right? They understand what we do and why we do it, right? And I think that to your point, Pamela, the biggest influence is that storytelling is around change management. And we are definitely, oh boy,
we have a guest storyteller with us.
Is around change management, right? Because we are at the core of it, right? In my opinion, if we're not, there's a problem. And it's about communication. And part of that communication is the story of why are we doing this, right? And that requires a story. It's not all about data, right? You can come with all the data and go, this is why. And people go, okay, I don't feel a connection to that at all, right? Like, tell me why this is better for me, right? And that's a story.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Live those values, right? And it ultimately strengthens the culture of the company, because there's that connection, right? Like, oh yeah, Lisa told me that really cool story about why, resilience is important to her, right? Or part of the core values of the company. And people then go make their own and then share them.
Yeah, to your point, Lisa, people join organizations based on those core values or what the mission is of that company. I mean, literally, I just became a board member for AirVet in California, which does telehealth medicine for animals, telehealth medicine for animals. And I'm like, this is just revolutionary. This is amazing. Like, I want to be a part of this. Like, that was the story, that they told me the story about. And I'm like, I want to align myself with this company because of what they do and what they're for. And people look at that. Like, that's the story sells people on why to come be a part of that organization, and then why to work hard or give their time. I mean, people spend most of their waking lives at work, doing work. Why do they want to commit their lives to that organization from within or for that boss? Why do they want to work for that mentor there, or that person that's leading the charge within that department? Making that, again, going back to your original point, making that connection. So it's all hand in hand, and it's all done through storytelling to get that buy-in.
Thank you. Pamela, I see you unmuted, please.
No, I just was gonna as a additional cat mom, I'm waiting for my two to jump up behind me. I'm shocked they haven't yet. So no worries there, Lisa. I think to build off, and I agree with Jason absolutely about the connection piece, and congrats on your new position, Jason. For me, I think going back to Lisa's point, it really is taking the data to connect the dots. That's really all it is. I think for me, the data, and I always say data storytelling, and I'll have to try and reframe it for this. Storytelling, once you build that narrative, I think it's really about taking all the jargon out of the way and really just distilling that core message, tying it back to whether it's the core values or whether it's just the strategy that we're trying to get to or the roadmap that we're trying to build. But connecting the dots ultimately is the purpose and the intent of the storytelling. And maybe it's to build the relationships, maybe it's to get something done, but it's the connections that make the difference.
What I am hearing from all of you, and what I am also picking up from the comments, is that not all HR stories are created equal. So I was wondering, what are some of the most powerful HR stories, and can we maybe plot them along the people experience? Maybe can we look at them through the lens of engaging with different functions? Are the function customized stories different in any way? But before we jump into that, Lisa, we absolutely have to know the name of your cat. And I am so sorry I don't have my co-facilitators, because we would have had two Frenchies bringing their own stories.
Yes, this is Robbie, who is just insistent on being part of this. So sorry.
Wonderful.
I don't know what the problem is, but can I jump into the question?
Well, yes, please. Robbie opened this for you, please.
Exactly. So I'm going to share a story from an experience that I've had, over the years with engineering teams. So I'm in tech, right? I have been doing that for 25 years. I just put a big age on my head. But I have one-on-ones with everyone in my company. It's something that I've done from, early in my HR career. It's not really scalable, but that's another topic. And I have these one-on-ones with everyone in the company. And I found that as I was talking and having one-on-ones with my engineering team, that I usually hired all of them, right? That it's very hard for them to understand why HR wants to have a one-on-one, right? They're like, why? What's the problem? Did I do something wrong? What's going on, right? And so you have to, break those walls down. But for me, one of the stories that I tried to help engineers understand why they're doing the work that they're doing, right? Many times in these one-on-ones, they come to me and they say, I don't understand, like, tell me why we're doing what we do, right? Because they work in a little bit of a silo, right? Without a lot of communication sometimes from organizations, which is another topic altogether. But if you are not communicating to everyone in the organization, right, why you're doing what you're doing, right, and how it impacts, and sharing the stories around our customers, right, and how we potentially address pain points. If you're not sharing that with everyone, then they're not connected, right? So I started telling the story of particular customers and how we made their lives easier, and they could go home at night comfortable and confident that the information that they gave their managers or leaders was solid, right? They could spend time with their families. They didn't have to worry like, oh God, is the data that I shared, I happen to be in the data analytics space, was it good, right? Was it right? Am I gonna, is it tomorrow, am I going to walk in and it's going to be, oh my God, you shared horrible data, right? It's not, it doesn't work. It's not important, right? You don't realize how you're affecting someone's life. It's not just where they are in their job, right? They take that home, right? And so if you can provide them the comfort and the ease that, yeah, that's it. It was good data. I'm confident. I got them what they needed is really important. And to see their faces go, oh yeah, I never really thought about it, like how we actually affect people beyond their day-to-day, like when they're in the office. And it just does. At the end of the day, we're humans, right? Everything affects us. And so that's my story, very specific to engineering, because they oftentimes don't understand, right? Because it's not shared with them.
Wonderful story. Nicole, please.
Yeah, so I'm going to jump right in and add to what Lisa was saying. First, I'm going to say, Robbie here shows us the exact difference between dogs and cats, right? I tell my dog to go away and lay on a bed, and they will. That cat is going to come after you until you give it exactly what it wants.
Yeah, this is it. He's the seventh person in the show.
Exactly. But Lisa took the words right out of my mouth, right? And I'm going to give one answer that way, and I'm going to give another one that's going to sound like a bit of a hedge. But the first is that the most important story, as Lisa said, is you have to help people understand the importance of what they do and how that ladders up to the success of the organization. And engineering is definitely a critical area, but it doesn't matter where you work. There is that disconnect the further down you go into an organization. And so I've spent many, many years in financial services. I've also spent years in agriculture and sustainability. If you can't explain to somebody what they're doing, I mean, take an engineer, right? If you can't get an engineer or anybody else to understand the challenges that a farmer is having, right, on their farm and the success of that individual farmer, then you've lost your disconnect, right? If you can't tell stories and influence around stories such as, you can never drive a car another day in your life and ride a bike. And if a cruise ship goes 1 mile, that's wiped, right? It's those types of powerful stories that help your folks get behind what the company's doing and help them understand how, if I come in every day and I crunch this data, or I code this, or I make sure that we are good stewards of the investor's dollar, whatever that is, that I'm here, right? I know what we're doing and I know where we're trying to go. My second answer around, which sounds like a little bit of a hedge, is going to be, it depends where your company is. It depends on where you are. Are you a 100-year-old company or are you a 100-day-old company, right? What are the risks of your organization? What is the biggest goal of your organization right now, right? Are you in a place where talent acquisition is a mess and you've got 500 job openings and that's the most important thing? Is your attrition at 60%? You can't keep anybody in? Like, your messaging around that, your storytelling around that is going to be really critical in that space. Do you have a massive wave of retirements pending because everybody's been at your organization for 30 years? Those are the types of things that are going to lead to, number two being whatever that is for where you are in your organization, the stage of your organization, the goals, the risks. That's going to determine what is the next important message that you give to your folks, and how, from an HR perspective, you influence and you storytell around whatever that is. In the pandemic, who would ever thought, right? Like, all of a sudden, message around health was number one. I would have never guessed that in a million years, right? But you change the environment, you change to what's the crisis of the moment or whatever's going on. So that's a little bit of a hedge, but I truly believe that it really does. Every organization's different. What they're dealing with is different in the moment.
I'm going to tack onto that really quick, just because I think that's a very important point. The maturity stage that your company is at, the stories will be different, and they'll evolve over time as the company grows, right? And understanding where the company is today, and making sure that those stories are in line with that, right, is super important. And so many companies get it wrong. They're talking up here, they're telling stories up here, and people are like, I don't know what you're talking about, right? We're in the trenches here dying, right? And that story doesn't help me at all, right?
Femelin, I think I saw you reaching for the unmute, and then we go to Burjette.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So yes, absolutely. I think that there are a lot of different factors that will impact how the story is set up and how it's built. I saw a question come up on the comments around like specific frameworks. I think one of the beautiful things about storytelling is that it's no matter what the age of the company, how it's framed up will change. The kind of content that we use will change based on the vertical, the maturity, right? And even within that, you're going to have managers that are way more mature than others, and you're going to have to frame it based on the audience, right? So I think if you want to talk about sort of a basic framework around storytelling, for me, it's to keep it really crisp. So one, you start with the end, and some of these are going to be trite, and I'll apologize in advance, but I always start with the end in mind when I start building out the story I want to tell. I am personally pretty anti HR speak. Like, I literally have like the Cards Against Humanity, but Cards Against HR, because I just don't like the jargon. So I always try to strip out the jargon and strip out all the HR speak that tends to creep in when we start building out any sort of visuals to go along with our storytelling aids. And realize that we're the storytellers, right? We are the presentation. It's not about relying on tables and splashy graphics. It's about, back to Lisa's first point, and she just stole the whole show with it. It's making the connection with the audience. So knowing the audience and understanding that you are the presentation in this piece. And then to both your points, it's catering, knowing the audience. What's the maturity level? Where are they at? How do you make the connection between the farmer and the engineer? Right. I come out of, like Lisa, most of my experience has been in the tech space. I spent a number of years in financial services as well. And the language is different, right? What's important to them is different. Their communication styles are different. So understanding the levels that you're communicating with, maturity, understanding what you're trying to solve for, and let that inform how you build your story. And then it really is just really creating the narrative, pulling in some data points around that narrative to make or break, the point that you're trying to get across, and then refining it, editing it, and then making it as crisp as you can, and then going out to market with it, because that's essentially what we're going to be doing then is selling it, right? Mm. But for me, it's not over engineering, I think is my core message. It's got to be real and authentic, and if it's totally manufactured, you're going to lose your audience 2 minutes in.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Burjette.
Kalman, I know you said that there is not a framework, but as I'm looking at my notes and what you're saying, I think that it naturally does start to exist in a framework or way to do storytelling. And you're spot on in that it's starting with the end in mind was my first thought, as well as knowing what are you trying to accomplish in that story. And that becomes the outline for how do you build back. So anchoring to what do you want to accomplish? What is the end in mind? But then also who is your audience, and how do you then tailor your approach and your messaging based on the starting point of your audience? Because that will shift based on where they sit in the organization, what resonates with them, what does not. The last piece I'll add, not to reiterate what was shared, but to really add to it is that it's important that storytelling doesn't only start and end in HR. For storytelling to be impactful, it has to be a way of working in the organization. It has to be something that employees are familiar with, and they will understand, why is this story coming in, and why is Bridget talking about this in the middle of a meeting? But so that it becomes part of the culture and really how you operate. That's an important piece of that. In order to do that well, it has to be something that, as we practice and get better at it, we also empower and encourage other leaders to do the same. That's a muscle that takes time to build, and something that doesn't come naturally oftentimes. So it's working to build that muscle and storytelling into the organizational culture. That does help when it comes to introducing or reinforcing core values and the behaviors that are associated with that, and recognizing and rewarding and continuing to celebrate those behaviors. Bringing the storytelling in helps to bring it to life. It helps to indicate, how does this value show up in the day-to-day, and how do we celebrate when someone has truly lived that value and embodies it and empowers others to do the same. So that's my little piece on it. Really around the power of the storytelling, but how do you bring it to life in the day-to-day?
Well, Jason, you're in the hot seat of going. Okay, we go Jason and then Nicole, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Nicole.
Look,
Okay,
Nicole,
yeah.
go
I
on.
just had a thought.
No, go on, Nicole. Jump in real fast. It's on there.
Okay. Thanks, Jason. I just had a thought. What Bridget said reminded me of something. And one, I know we're talking at a pretty high level, and I just wanted to call out that storytelling doesn't have to mean at the organizational level, right? Storytelling, like Lisa said, can be in a one-on-one meeting, right? It can be in a meeting of 3 or 4 people. It does not have to be an overarching message. I saw in the comments that somebody said, isn't this sort of communications or PR? No, this is a way of communicating. This is a cultural sort of way of working and communicating to get points across. But Bridget's point made me remember an example of where it's like, you can be in an organization where you come into a meeting and somebody has a 50-page deck chocked full of a million different ideas, thoughts, data, all of the stuff, and you look at it and you're like, what in the heck are they talking about? Or you can be in an organization where somebody comes in with 8 pages and walks you through a story, and at the end you completely understand it, and a decision can be made and you can move forward, right? And that is a cultural difference in the way that you work, and it is about storytelling, right? So thank you, Jason.
No problem at all. So again, I think part of the fact of what we're discussing is storytelling could be utilized in order to get everyone collectively working together, one team, one approach, centered around, again, either a goal, moving a certain goal of the organization, or living by the cultural values of the organization or its mission. But from the influence perspective, storytelling, to Pamela, what Pamela was saying is, you need to influence with data, right? So you need to tell the story about, one, where's the data, the story around how we're going to make the change, and then follow up again, close out the story with what were the results of how the data's moved in the positive direction, but also sharing that with the team, right? Sharing that with the greater organization, of what their contributions, to Nicole's point earlier. Every person has a part in this, right? I always think of like Ford Motor Company back in the day in the assembly line. One person leaves the screw out, or person leaves that fuse out of the car's not going to start, right? So everyone has an integral part of that organization or part of that product. And they need to know their value to the organization, so that way they can feel like they have an onus of the results. Last thing I would also say is just, again, with storytelling is practicing on servant leadership and being good mentors, showing that, again, the connected part of it, making sure that leaders understand, they're transparent, they're willing to get in with their people, love their people, and their people will love them back within the organization, or want to do their best for them. So that whole connection portion of the influence is making sure that the leader is someone who really is that trusted mentor, trusted resource, that can have that influencing power. So that way they're not just a talking bobblehead on top of a stage that someone's like, oh yeah, they tell a great story, but they really don't mean it. No, they know that that person truly means what they're saying, right? So that's really important, because all throughout history, we hear great speakers all the time. You can go to church on Sundays, you can go listen to politicians. They're all really good speakers sometimes, but is what they're saying really the truth? Do you really believe what they're saying? So someone could be a great storyteller, but not necessarily a great leader. So to really, you have to have that trust to make sure that you're connecting the two.
Pamela.
I saw a question pop up, and I wanted to make sure that we talked about it as a group. Someone asked, "How do you utilize storytelling in the face of ambiguity?" And I love this question because I tend to come into things with data, and when you're dealing with gray space and ambiguity, for me, the best way to utilize storytelling in a very highly ambiguous environment is that it creates the relationship where you don't have or can't access the data that you need. Or want maybe to be able to tell a compelling story, then we can utilize storytelling as a way to build the connection, as a way to understand how that ambiguity is impacting the person or teams that are having the conversation with, and to be able to build that bridge, I think is the clearest way to talk about it.
Thank you so much, Pamela, for reading my mind, because I was going to weave that question, and I want to open it for everybody on the panel. How do we use storytelling, especially in times of ambiguity and change and upheaval?
Well,
Jason.
I'm going to start because I worked most recently for a company that was probably one of the most recognizable brands in the industry, and I worked through the toughest times and most negative PR. So I worked for Sears, and I headed HR for Sears for over a decade. And I mean, iconic brand, one of the largest employers ever. Try storytelling in an environment like that where to keep people motivated, right? And people wanted to work for that brand in the face of adversity, where everyone's saying, every day you hear, oh, they're still open, they're still in business, So imagine that as a mental breakdown of a person working there, or being at every holiday party, listening to that from their family. So, yeah, the ambiguity that I'm bringing forward is the company going to be there tomorrow? Is the company going to be there next month? The ambiguity of what the future holds for somebody that is at that employer, not just the ambiguity of a certain situation, but the ambiguity of job security. So I think, again, having a focused storytelling and putting your best version forward of believing in the company, believing in the mission, believing in the product and the value proposition that the products bring, that you have, the value proposition that you bring as an employer, the value proposition that you bring as a leader to that person or a mentor to that individual who's on your team, are all part of the story that you're telling, to try and, again, disperse the ambiguity, to make sure there's clear transparency of what's being done. And yes, maybe the long-term future still is somewhat ambiguous, but the person feels connected to the here and the now of what they're contributing to, right? So that they feel like there is a purpose of a sense of purpose, whether, again, it's going to, provide a product that is of critical need to someone, whether it's receiving mentorship, in the immediate of someone who's an awesome boss, or whether it's, having a company that allows a certain flexibility of a work-life balance that fills a critical gap to that individual. So what's in it for them as the employee? What's in it, and you have to connect that. You have to find out what that is, what drives them individually, to keep them engaged in times of hardship or in times of ambiguity.
I'll go ahead and jump in, and I've been in my career for a number of years. I'll try not to put an age on my head, but somebody show me an organization that doesn't constantly have ambiguity. I certainly have never worked in one. I would if you guys know where one is, let me know, because I'd love to do a case study on that organization, because it's certainly no place that I've ever been. So, I think storytelling, again, is part of an influencing tool. And I think, you use it consistently to get points across. I want to caution us in looking at storytelling as this approach when something is big, right? This approach that when we have to talk to the entire organization, that we story tell in this one particular way, right? This is, again, about being able to communicate with people. Think of this as a one-on-one level, right? Think about how, we'll take it down to the most rudimentary level. Think about talking to a kid and trying then to get them to understand something. And I'm not saying that we work with children, like, please don't misunderstand my example, but trying to get them to understand something. And you're taking them along the path of how you're going to get them to understand it, right? That is what storytelling is, right? And so again, whether it's ambiguity, which you may do at a bigger level because of Jason's example, I was at Citi during the financial crisis. We went home on a Friday, our stock was at $1, right? If we traded under $1, Citi went away. And yes, and you didn't tell anybody where you worked at holiday parties. You know, like huge ambiguity to little things. But it is about being able to make connections through your communication. And so it doesn't have to be a special way of communicating when things are, you know, very ambiguous. And so I want to caution us from thinking about it just in that manner. Right? Storytelling is something that we do every single day. We do it in one-on-one communications. It's not a top-down communication method, right? You can go to your leader, you can go to your manager and be like, here's a problem I found. Here's how I think we should solve it. That's storytelling, right? Here's what we found. Here's what we think happened. Here's what I think we should do. That's storytelling, right? That's how you get it there. And then you talk through it. So, you know, it's up, down, sideways. It doesn't matter the direction, and it doesn't have to be at a large scale, and it doesn't have to just be when ambiguity is at play. And so I just, you know, I want to pull us back out of that and make sure that we're understanding it at its most fundamental level.
Pamela, you want to jump back?
Yeah, I did. Nicole, hi, fellow Citi alum. Nicole, I forgot about that. I meant to call that out when I messaged you on LinkedIn. I think, yeah, you made a great point. I will say that this isn't, yes, it's a tool, absolutely. And I still think it's utilized as a tool, and it can be used from enterprise down to one-on-one, down to talking to your child, right? This is, and it's not meant to be this sort of calculated thing. It's a way that we talk as a species. Literally, this is how we survive, is to tell ways, like, you know, like cavemen 1 million years ago, there's a giant something out there, and how do we get to safety? Like, you communicated effectively through telling compelling stories. So we do this at home with our relationships, with our children, with our friends. You know, I met a guy who told amazing stories, and I married him. So, like, you know, the power of a great storyteller cannot be understated, or overstated. So I think that you make a great point, Nicole. It isn't this sort of premeditated thing. You know, when we start to think about how we communicate naturally every day, you're already doing it. It's just applying it now to work. So think about it sort of with that lens. It's just refining how you're telling the stories, and maybe trying to put that framework that we've all talked about, right? You know, there's not one right or wrong way to tell a story. It is about those points that we've already hit on a few times around, just sort of like that narrative and like pulling out all the jargon. We don't do that with our husbands, our partners, or our kids. But it really is that one-on-one.
But thank you for making.
I think about somebody who's a bad storyteller,
Yeah.
right? That person who drags on and on and on, you know, like, yeah, it's rough.
Yeah.
I just want to thank Pamela for making me smile here, because I still every now and again hear organizational stories about something big and bad out there. How do we deal with it? So if we look at the timeline of human storytelling evolution, you know, on some days we make bigger progress than on others. Burjet, Lisa, would you like to add anything to this topic?
I'm not going to talk so much about the ambiguity, because I think we've, you know, definitely hit on that. But I want to talk a little bit about how, you know, we don't always realize or notice that stories are everywhere, right? They're in every moment of our lives, right? Yet rarely do we stop and actually notice them, right? Take a step back and go, this is a story, right? It provides that pervasive, implicit explanation of why things are the way they are, right? It gives you an understanding of new information. You know, it provides the storing of values and virtues, right? It provides a guide for what we might be or what we could be, right? And I think that's really important, that it goes beyond just a story now. They're everywhere, right? Take a minute to step back and realize that and notice them, because they influence us in our lives every minute of every day.
Yeah. What a great point. Burjet.
Sure, I'll just add one last point here, and it's really around storytelling itself. I think if we're not careful, it seems like this big thing that we're building up to this crescendo, and it's really our way of speaking and engaging and connecting with our audience and our stakeholders, whomever that is. If I bring it back to our use of storytelling in HR, it's connecting. It's finding a way to build connection, to build a level of familiarity, and to draw whomever you're working to influence, be it the employees, be it other leaders in the organization, but finding a way to connect and drive impact with them in a way that resonates and being real in doing so.
Real quick, sorry. But one thing I want to point out is to Pamela's husband, he has a natural gift, right? Not everybody's a good storyteller, to what Nicole mentioned. So it's important, like I always say this, the 5 Ps, proper preparation prevents poor performance. You can use that in everything, but you can use it in storytelling. You have to know, you should prepare yourself as a leader, as a person, to know, okay, here's how I can connect to these things in life, and write down those stories. Like know your own personal stories up front ahead of time before you go and think about presenting those. So that's all. It doesn't come naturally to we're all presenters and panelists on here today because we're probably passionate. We're all good storytellers, right? But that we're not, I don't want to say we're the exception, but not everybody is given that gift, right? So you do have to prepare your stories.
Can I say one thing, Jack? Sorry, and I'm just going to piggyback.
And then Burjat, yes.
Sorry. Just yes, to your point, not everybody's a born storyteller, and I think you absolutely can learn it. And what I was going to just say briefly is just to, if you go out and look at like TED Talks, there's 100, if not more, like storytelling focused themes. And there's some great books. I'm happy if you guys want to connect. We can talk about some great books that go into the mechanics of storytelling and how to build that skill set. That was really my only point that I wanted to get across. There's some great questions in the panel too, Jack. Yep. We should probably try and get to.
Yep. Burjat.
Nothing to add. I was just going to echo, and so we'll get to the other questions.
I do have one question that I was thinking about bringing, because very early on across the comments and also across your answers, you touched on authenticity, you touched on emotions, you touched on showing up authentically and vulnerably. And we are less than 10 minutes away from wrapping this conversation up. So I would really ask if each of you can take maybe 1 minute each. How do you weave your own personal stories, your own personal experiences, the stories that you tell your own selves into the stories that you share with your team and with your organization? And Jason, you linked this very clearly to leadership. I would ask you to go first and then we build from there. So really punchline kind of tips for the audience.
I started my career, I cleaned toilets. I was a frozen food selector where I selected foods in a frozen food warehouse that was operated by a Teamsters union. I was the only non-union person. I was only done that because my dad was the HR manager or personnel manager back in the day. And I never forgot where I started. And I think that's what's really important about leadership is don't forget where you started and never forget that everyone deserves to be treated equally the same way. And that's where you have authenticity, and you establish the trust. And again, with that, when you have that authenticity, when people believe in you as an authentic person, you breed a ground of being able to be a great storyteller who is passionate about what they speak about and who drives and influences people to want to follow them or believe in that story and believe in that mission. So that's where you get great leadership.
Thank you. Where should Nicole?
I'll go. I agree with what Jason said. I tend to be a pretty open leader with my teams and will typically answer anything people ask me. I'm just kind of open that way. And I utilize that in my storytelling as appropriate. But the other thing, and this was mentioned before, and I don't remember who mentioned it, but it is about the audience, right? And the stories that you utilize and the things from your own experience that you bring into a story have to resonate with your audience. And so if I'm talking to a group of actuaries at an insurance company, that's going to be different than the stories that I speak to a group of cattle farmers, that is different than a group of creatives at an ad agency, right? Like that same story would fall flat in one of those groups, right? Whatever it is. And so you really have to understand what's going to resonate best. And that's back to Jason's preparation standpoint, right? Like knowing your own stories and knowing what will resonate. And so for me, it's finding out, do I have a point of connection with the group that I'm speaking with, the group of 2, the group of 1, the group of 1,000? It doesn't matter. What's the topic? What's the goal? And then can I mine my own experiences? Can I mine something that I have to be able to pull that into the storytelling in a way that will weave pull the thread through it that will get us to the end goal? Sometimes you won't have that, right? And so you'll figure out something else. You'll use an example of, somebody famous. You'll use an example of something else. But if I have that personally, I will pull it through, right? But it's all about who you're speaking with, right? You don't go in and talk numbers to creatives. You don't talk creative to the actuaries. It's just that type of stuff, and you learn that along the way, and it makes a huge, huge difference in the examples that you draw on.
Thank you. Lisa.
Yeah, I'm going to, you touched on a really important point, Nicole, is that I call it differentiated communication, right? It's also differentiated listening and hearing, right? And to your point, you don't walk into a room of creatives and start throwing out, open up a spreadsheet, your P&L and go, okay, let's talk about that. They're like, what? So you have to know your audience, right? We, of all people, need to know our audience more than anyone in the organization. Right? We need to know who we're talking to and how to best bring and tie them to the goal, right? What's the end goal here, right? I think that vulnerability is, it's definitely a word that's been thrown out a lot around leadership, right? And I think that for me, it is being open and exposed. For me, it's the essence, it's the foundation of profound human connections, right? And it also can create a sign of, some people feel like it's a sign of weakness, right? And it's actually it's a deeply important part of the human experience, right? And if we could just take a moment to experience vulnerability every day in some form, right? We could see that that's actually the birthplace for joy, creativity, authenticity, love, right? Connection, all of those things that I don't think we see as vulnerable, right? Their weakness. We don't share those things, right? But if you do that, if you just a little bit every day in some part of your life, you'll see that it gives you a chance to reconnect with the human parts of ourselves, because it is about us, right? It lets you take your guard down and to be seen for who we really are, right? And I am, an extremely open and I'm totally fine with being vulnerable. It's okay. But again, you have to know your audience, right? I don't go in and tell a story that is completely unrelatable to my audience, right?
Yeah.
It's lost. It's a waste of time and breath and words.
Yeah. Thank you. Bridget, would you like to go next? And then we close with Pamela.
Sure. So a few quick tips or last notes I would say is within storytelling, authenticity is so important. If you're telling a story that does not resonate, but is not you, whether it's a story that you're drawing upon of a personal experience or a story that you can draw from observation or understanding, that's the key piece of it. And I think, Nicole, that's what you were sharing as well, is the story has to be something that you're comfortable with and something that you're able to share in order for it to be authentic. And that's something that is so key, and something that we as leaders and have evolved to show a level of vulnerability. And I was in a meeting last week and we talked about that. It sometimes takes courage and it takes years of experience and coming into who you are in order to have that level of authenticity and vulnerability. But I say, why? If that's a space that we can, as company cultures and individual perspectives, start to do that at a much earlier stage in our careers, I think it creates more richness throughout, and it allows that authenticity, not when you get to a certain level in an organization or a certain stage in your career, but just showing up as that from the beginning. So that's a piece I would say. How do we practice that?
Thank you. Pamela, bring us home on this one.
Oh, no pressure, Jack. That's great. I think, yes, absolutely, Bridget, agree. Couldn't agree more. I think we have to model it. And so for me, I think anyone who knows me will tell you that I have no poker face. And so I don't have any choice but to bring my authentic self. And so the way I approach this is, and the way I approach storytelling is, I look for commonalities. Whether it's, I'm going to go back to the dairy farmer versus the engineering. It's such a great dichotomy, right? There's always something in the human experience that we can find commonality through and make connection with. And so I think that when you approach storytelling, and we've kind of made it a little bit mechanical today, and I just want to call out, this is a natural sort of way that we communicate. It's just, this is how our brains are wired, to find connection, to find common ground. And so I think that's where I keep the focus. And so somebody had asked a question around, if you lose your audience's attention, I pivot and I make it personal intentionally. And I come back to, how do I find that common ground with the people or person that I'm speaking with? And I keep it as natural and as real as I have to. I can't be fake if I tried. It's not a skill set that I ever want to learn. So for me, it's just, all the points made here today have been spot on. And it's just, to wrap it up, it's just be real, be intentional, and just find that common ground.
Thank you all so very much. We are so painfully, frustratingly on the hour, and we ran out of time. So I would like to say a big thank you to everybody in the audience. But I will take 30 more seconds of your time, and we will have the mic drop round. And this should go very, very quickly. What is one skill, one critical skill for storytelling, and extra points if that skill is not within the circle of usual suspects? So a skill that is quite, courageously and curiously attached to storytelling. What we will do, we will go counterclockwise. So Burjette will go first. I will give you just a few seconds to think about it. One skill, one word, no explanation. And thank you, Jessa, for taking care of us. Enrique for creating this conversation, and everybody in the audience for being here. Burjette, good to go? One skill.
Be bold.
Thank you. Pamela.
Humor.
Jason.
Practice makes perfect.
Nicole.
Listen.
And Lisa.
Know your characters.
Thank you. Burjette, Pamela, Jason, Nicole, Lisa, and Robbie, it was a joy and a privilege having you here today. And until
you guys
next
just missed
time,
that he was screaming to talk.
aren't we all, Lisa? Until next time, everybody, happy storytelling. And it was wonderful spending this hour with you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.